Say the proposed amendment to the Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Bill is too little too late. The Northern Irish rap group Kneecap have offered their heartfelt apologies to the families of the murdered MPs, Sir David Amess and Joe Cox. Footage taken in 2023 appeared to show one of the members calling for fans to kill their MP.
Added to the morning queues already back to Beckton. We've also got roadworks on the A40 eastbound at the Hoover building at Perivale. Lane 1 closed for the next 2 weeks. Queues back to the Greenford flyover. On the trains, Piccadilly line not stopping at Rusk Square because of staff shortage. And just a reminder, there's possible disruptions still to flights to and from Spain and Portugal following the power supply problems there. Louise Pepper, BBC Radio London Travel. Next update at 7.
Louise.
Yeah.
I just showed Alice and Zabi the chicken in the can.
Yeah, are they? Can Zabi actually do his bulletin, or is he too stomach churn?
He's shook. That's traumatised. Alice, what do you think?
I feel white as a sheet. I feel a bit faint.
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't look at it on air because I retched.
No.
It was the jelly around it. I retched.
Nothing
I did.
Nothing wrong with it.
And then what's right? I'm going to America end of May. I'm bringing back up.
The group said the footage had been taken out of context. Power has been restored to about 90% of mainland Spain after yesterday's countrywide blackout, but many people overnight were still resorting to using candles and lanterns to light their homes. Stations in neighbouring Portugal are actually being brought back online. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Russia of trying to deceive the world by declaring a 3-day unilateral ceasefire the next week. The Kremlin said the pause in fighting will run from the 8th until the 11th of May. Celebrations marking the defeat of Nazi Germany during the Second World War. Alexander Pascal was chairing Ukraine's Foreign Affairs Committee. He told the BBC that President Putin's offer was legitimate.
General ceasefire, you need agreement on both parties, and you need some kind of military mechanism. It's typical trick played by Putin against Trump because he has some of it's a huge logistic event. He understands that he's not going to accept President Trump's ceasefire proposal, but he needs somehow to pretend as if he is sort of accepting.
Canada's Liberal Party is projected to win the country's national election for the next government. The majority of its elected can't remain Prime Minister. The UK's only ever judge to publicly reveal their trends is planning to take the government to the European Court of Human Rights. It's the Supreme Court's ruling that was defined in court as law by biological sex. Victoria says the judgment of the government
I'm a man of the Equality Act, so I have to probably guess I didn't give them the page for exception.
There are calls to allow male radiographers to perform breast screening examinations to tackle staff shortages. Mammograms are the only health examination carried out exclusively by female staff. Members of the Society of Radiographers say the policy needs to change. Sally Reid had 2 mastectomies after mammogram to prevent breast cancer, but told the BBC she agreed with it.
If I didn't have the mammogram, I would basically get me because what I've got, it wouldn't bother me. I would want it to be done. And I think they definitely be turned on by a man.
The Sky News Centre at 6, people in Madrid have cheered as power was finally restored. Electricity's returned to large parts of Spain and Portugal after one of the biggest outages in history. Trains came to a halt, phones were down, traffic lights stopped and cash machines failed to work. For many of the 50 million people who live there, it also hit southern France. Engineers are blaming a rare atmospheric phenomenon which could take days to fully resolve. Mark Carney's leading Liberals have been projected to win Canada's federal election, capping a huge turnaround for the party. It had been heading for defeat against the Conservatives. That was before Donald
leader, Mr. Polyev, who had been ahead for so long, seemed unable to pivot, in part, I think, because part of his base would be what you call a MAGA base.
Convicted of sex offences won't be able to claim asylum in the UK. The government says the changes to help tighten border security. The band's Kneecap have apologised to the families of murdered MPs Jo Cox and Sir David Amess. A video from 2023 appeared to show a member urging people to kill Tory MPs. The group claims an extract from footage has been taken out of context. The sugar tax applied to fizzy drinks could be extended to milkshakes. The government's consulting on proposals to end the exemption for dairy-based drinks, as well as non-dairy substitutes like oats and rice. The Treasury changes. And Channel 4 is dedicating a night of programming to location next month. It's to mark the 25th anniversary of the Property Show. That's the latest. I'm Laura Safe.
This Tech Check briefing is sponsored by Comcast Business, powering possibilities.
I'm Deirdre Bosa, and this is your CNBC Tech Check briefing. IBM announcing today it plans to invest $150 billion in the U.S. over the next 5 years. The company says the investment is aimed at accelerating America's role as a global leader in computing, with $30 billion of that spend intended to advance U.S. manufacturing of its mainframe and quantum computers. Last week, IBM posted better than expected first quarter results, including $2.9 billion in revenue from its infrastructure division that includes mainframe computers. Earlier this month, IBM announced a new Z17 AI mainframe. And Elon Musk's xAI Holdings is in discussions with investors to raise roughly $20 billion. That's according to Bloomberg News. The funding would reportedly value the company at over $120 billion. Sources telling CNBC's David Faber earlier this month that Musk was looking to assign, quote, proper value to the company. xAI has not responded to a request from comment from CNBC. Last month, the AI firm acquired X in an all-stock deal that valued xAI at $80 billion. And Meta will hold its first ever LlamaCon Tuesday amid CEO Mark Zuckerberg's push to make the company the market leader in AI. Questions loom over whether President Trump's tariff-heavy policies will impact that strategy. Investors will be watching for both any color on Meta's planned $65 billion spend on AI infrastructure this year, and signs that its AI investments is having an impact on business. That's all for today. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.
This Tech Check briefing is sponsored by Comcast Business, Expert Partnership. Comcast Business helps turn today's enterprises into engines of modern business, powering the engine of modern business.
There's a 5-minute congestion on the M1 in 50 yards. You're still on the fastest route.
This is Pedro Sanchez sent word to nearly half the country by late Monday evening, following a major blackout that also affected much of Portugal. Authorities had yet to determine the cause of the outage, which started just after midday, halting trains, flights, ATMs, phone networks, and the internet. Both countries declared national emergencies. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says a truce between Russia and Ukraine needs to, quote, happen soon. Otherwise, Washington could walk away from talks. U.S. President Donald Trump says Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky would be willing to allow Russia to keep the Crimean Peninsula. President Zelensky has repeatedly denied this. Iran's government says a massive blast at its biggest commercial port on Saturday was caused by negligence and safety failures. The customs office at the Shahid Raja'i port said a blaze likely broke out at a chemical storage depot. State media said more than 70 people were killed and 1,000 injured. Authorities said several individuals responsible had been identified. This is DW News from Berlin. You can find out more on our website, dw.com.
Interesting, and I think there is a difference of opinion in parts of government. I think some people in government think that the government might well end up having to seek derogations. I think others think it may well be a matter of issuing new guidance to immigration judges, or indeed there are some people in government I've spoken to who think a lot of this is misreporting of cases which actually have a sound basis in law. So I think there really are quite a wide spectrum of opinions on that in government, but it's something to watch very closely.
Henry Zeffman, thank you.
It's nearly 6:45. A Home Office minister told MPs yesterday in Parliament that she expects local inquiries into grooming gangs to go further than the 5 already proposed. Jess Phillips' comments came as she faced questions about what progress had been made since the government announced the plan back in January. Here's our parliamentary correspondent, Alicia McCarthy.
In mid-January, the government announced there'd be 5 local inquiries into grooming gangs that abuse children. It also promised what it called a 3-month rapid audit carried out by former civil servant and Whitehall fixer Lady Casey to find out what data had already been collected and to see what lessons could be learnt. Since then, the Shadow Home Secretary, the Conservative Chris Philp, has been keeping a close eye on the calendar.
3 months has now passed, and we've heard nothing whatsoever.
And anyway, he reckoned the government's approach of holding local inquiries wouldn't cut it. He repeated the Conservatives' demand for a national inquiry with the power to force witnesses to attend.
5 local inquiries, which can't compel the production of evidence, just won't do. 50 towns are affected, not 5. And Bradford, where some of the worst abuse occurred, is refusing to cooperate with any inquiry at all.
The Safeguarding Minister, Jess Phillips, insisted she knew full well what the problems were.
I spoke to some of the victims of grooming gangs this morning. I will speak to some more tomorrow. I have spoken to them from Oxford, from Birmingham, from Rochdale, from Rotherham, from Oldham.
She insisted what was needed now was action that actually changed things. For Lib Dems, Lisa Smart focused on the victims and survivors of the gangs.
We owe it to them not just to offer words of support, but to deliver justice and bring offenders to account. And this also means taking firm preventative action to protect future generations from such harm.
Of the promised local inquiries, only one area has so far been named, Oldham in Lancashire. Earlier this month, amid claims that the plans had been watered down, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, insisted all 5 would go ahead. A Conservative, Dame Karen Bradley, wanted more detail.
Could she provide more information about when we will know about the remaining 4 locations? And also, what will she do to ensure that councils that are reluctant to be part of this are compelled to do so?
Jess Phillips sought to reassure her.
Whilst we have committed to 5, I expect to actually go further.
The Minister explained that an outline of best practice for local authorities holding inquiries would be published in May, which was also when she'd be releasing Lady Casey's audit findings.
I don't know what Baroness Casey is going to say about which particular area and how and what I might need to focus on. I'm going to go on the basis, and I have to say in this debate, this doesn't happen very often, I'm going to go on the basis of facts, and I'm going to follow them wherever they tell me there are victims that need help. That is where I will go.
Labour's Paul Wall represents Rochdale, which had its own group of those helping victims and survivors.
Their priorities are courts backlog, which means cases are waiting until March 2027 to go to trial. They want longer-term funding commitments to help groups like theirs, and they want a wider recognition that most sexual abuse and child rape is perpetrated not by strangers, but by family and friends.
But Reform UK's Lee Anderson wasn't satisfied.
Thousands of young, white, British working-class girls have been raped, tortured and abused by Pakistani grooming gangs, and yet this minister here refuses to support a full national public inquiry. And what I want to know is, Mr. Speaker, is she part of the cover-up?
That's dangerous, said one MP. Shame, shouted another. Jess Phillips turned the page in her folder and took a breath, telling Lee Anderson his question didn't deserve a response.
I wonder how many victims he has sat and held hands with in court of grooming gangs. How many he's gone round to their house in the morning to get them out of bed, to get them into a courtroom. There is absolutely no way that I would be part of any cover-up.
An independent MP, Ayub Khan, described child sexual exploitation as a despicable crime.
Perpetrated by individuals with blackened souls. They come from all races, all creeds, religions, backgrounds.
but he warned that stopping those responsible shouldn't be done in a way that fans the flames of hate. Jess Phillips agreed with that, but said in the past there seemed to have been a cover-up for what she called multicultural reasons, and she said that would stand. That's Alicia. It's 11 minutes to 7 now. We're in Dnipro, in eastern Ukraine this morning, and at the moment the front line of this war cleaves the region of Zaporizhzhia, where I spent the last few days, really into two parts. And we'll hear throughout this morning's programme from people who live in this part of Ukraine and how that painful division affects their lives every day. And of course the hardest voices to reach are the ones who are still inside those areas occupied by Russia. But our correspondent Olga Martinez has been keeping in touch with some, and she's with me in These are the voices that we really need to hear, because they give us an insight into what life is like, what Russia is trying to change in the occupied parts of Ukraine, where life is dangerous for those people.
Well, the main emotion and main thought which I got from the people I've been talking to is the fear they've been building up through the years of occupation. And even talking to them is becoming dangerous. So every time we have to talk is usually is I have to message them and connect to them whenever they can, because all what happens every day. And they know that even when we speak to foreign journalists, they have already put themselves in danger. So what we can tell them is that they monitor what is being told about them, like terrorism very closely, and it is very painful for them obviously to hear that their destiny has been decided without them. And that both of them, both of those people who we reported yesterday, they said that they fear that the decision which will be taken will not include any of their opinions, but they don't have any possibility to actually express their opinion, because if their opinion is different with the current imposed authority, then they might face quite serious consequences, including the life danger. We spoke to a man, the woman, and I'm sure we'll be able to hear from the man a bit more later on. And he said that it is a very difficult decision, and he understands that it's impossible to make that decision really and to please everyone in this situation. But the biggest fear he has is that he might lose basically an access to Ukraine, to the whole external world, if this situation becomes permanent. I suggest listening to what he said to us. Basically, he's told to us that it's a choice between the bad and the worse.
You know, I've been trying to find an answer to that question probably every day for the past 3 months, and I can't. I believe that human life is the greatest value. Thus, bloodshed must stop. People must not die. No one should shoot anyone and kill. No one should be injured or lose their legs or arms. This is probably the biggest priority. On the other hand, there are certain conditions for stopping the fire, and not everyone might agree with them. Hence, it raises a question: why have all those people died then during the past 3 years? Do they feel abandoned and betrayed? Well, look, if one tries to analyze it logically, the question is, what else can the country do to prevent it from happening? They physically can't do anything, neither Ukraine nor here. This is a decision without a solution. But there is no solution except of delaying it. Unless there is a very strong support. To be able not to take such decision, one needs support. If there is support, there can be another decision. Without such support, why would more people die? What would we feel here? I don't know. It's very difficult. I don't envy anyone who is involved in this decision-making process. It won't be simple, black and white. I believe it is always possible to find a compromise, but perhaps everyone has their red lines which they do not want to cross. If we were talking with you face to face, I would possibly tell you one, but since it's a call, I won't say anything. I am a small person. My opinion is not interesting to everyone.
And all the these are the people who, if a ceasefire decision is made that gives that land permanently to Russia, they are the ones whose lives will be permanently affected.
Yes, what they told me is that they would feel absolutely isolated. So now what keeps them going is that hope that
Ukraine and the rest of the world is fighting for them. And if it is not the case anymore, they fear that basically they won't really have any hope.
Yeah, we'll hear more thoughts on that difficult decision through the programme this morning from South Region. Thank you, Olga Montes. Thank you so much for having me.
It is now 6 minutes to 7. Milkshakes, lattes, tin coffee drinks, as well as big brands like Lucozade, Ribena and Iron Brew, could all be hit by an extension to the sugar tax. An extension to that tax applied to fizzy drinks by George Osborne when he was Chancellor, which the Treasury is now consulting on. When the idea was first mooted of extending it in the budget, Conservatives later removed a sucker punch to families struggling with the cost of living. Let's talk to a supporter of the extension of the tax, the chairman of the National Obesity Forum, Tam Fry. Morning to you. Why do you welcome it?
Good morning. Good morning to you. I welcome it tremendously. I've been waiting for this for 6 years now. As the Conservative government first introduced the levy on sugar, and it was the first thing that the then Chief Medical Officer for England proposed when she set out the obesity strategy for Boris Johnson in 2019, and that's now 5-6 years ago, and we have been waiting for this. It is high time that the sugary drinks and the milkshakes came in.
Anti-obesity campaigners often hail this tax as a success because companies cut the amount of sugar in their drinks. But, and it's an important part, isn't it? The impact assessment that the government publishes for its proposal say it will cut the intake on the calorie a day for children aged between 5 and 10. 2 calories for teenagers. It's hardly a game changer on obesity, is it?
It's not a game changer, but it's just one of those things which is needed in order to improve the obesity problem. Sally Davis, when she delivered her strategy, did the list of things that she proposed, but it was by no means the only things. She listed about the situation, and this was just one of the 64.
It's hardly a reduction in calorie sugar, isn't it? And yet it could be a very large increase in the cost for families who are struggling.
Well, that's up to them. It is not a tax against the individual family. The levy, as it is probably called, is an incentive for industry to reformulate. And when it was first announced in 2016, industry recognised that it really had a big job to do. And within 2 years, stripped a lot of sugar out of their drinks, and it improved then the quality of the drinks itself, and saved a lot of intake of sugar, which will inevitably in the end help curing obesity.
In a sense, it's then natural that companies react to this by taking sugar out of them.
Yeah, that's right. That's what they did, and that's what they will do now, because
So sorry to interrupt you, but we're going to move to the weather and the news. But Tam Fry, chairman of the National Obesity Forum, it's very clear. Thank you for joining us.
Something that you might enjoy if you on BBC Sounds now.
Hello. What happened in the Brexit meeting? That's what my new series is. I'm James Smith, the world's most exciting Brexit champion, and I'm here to tell you to tune in for evidence of some treatment.
There's more chance of winning the lottery. Sorry, winning the lottery without it.
I don't know what. How many benches does it take to Brexit? The answer is 400 grams. But I think that's the time. I think it's never here. Going from one point of view, it's been very much.
It is topical for the news coverage.
Nick, good morning to you. We are looking at lots of dry weather and sunny weather over the next couple of days. In fact, temperatures will be well above the daily average. In fact, it's about 10 degrees above the seasonal average. So some exceptional warmth to come. Most places starting the day with some sunshine. There are a few mist patches here and there, nothing too significant. And any mistiness will tend to lift and clear quite quickly across the southwest of England, the southeast of England, the Midlands and eastern England. We're just a lot of sunshine to take us through the day.
spaces, she predicts that dangerous predatory men will find ways to exploit the new guidance.
Packaged milkshakes and latte coffees could face a sugar tax for the first time under government proposals to extend a pre-existing levy. The changes would also reduce the amount of sugar allowed in a drink before the tax applies, meaning hundreds more products would face the charge. The Conservatives said it was a sucker punch to households. Our political correspondent Harry Farley reports.
The soft drinks levy was introduced by the Conservatives in 2018 to tackle obesity. It's caused many companies to cut the sugar in their recipes to just below the threshold at which they have to pay the tax. Labour now suggests expanding the policy to include milk-based beverages. The government also wants to lower the amount of sugar allowed before the levy applies from 5 grams to 4 grams per 100 millilitres. Ministers said they believe it was time to set a more ambitious target and argued the changes could prevent thousands more people from becoming overweight.
The government says it's planning to change the law so that migrants convicted of sexual offences are barred from claiming asylum in the UK. Currently, only those handed a prison sentence of 1 year or more are blocked from applying. Home Secretary Ben Cooper says ministers are restoring order to a broken asylum system. Conservatives say the proposed amendment to the Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Bill is too little, too late. Here's our political correspondent Ben Wright.
Ministers want the law changed to deny refugee status to any foreign national convicted of a crime in the UK who puts them on the sex offenders register. Ben Cooper said the government was strengthening the law to ensure sex offences were treated with the seriousness they deserved, repairing a dysfunctional asylum system. Artificial intelligence is to be used to speed up the processing of asylum claims and a 24-week target set to hear asylum appeals from those in supported accommodation. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Phil accused ministers of not being serious about controlling the UK's borders.
Northern Irish rap group Kneecap has apologised to the families of the murdered MPs Sir David Amess and Joe Cox after footage appeared to show one of the members calling for fans to kill their MP. The video taken from the concert in 2023 is being assessed by counter-terrorism police. People say the footage has been taken out of context. The European Space Agency will launch the first of its kind satellite from French Guiana this morning. It's meant to weigh the amount of carbon in the world's forests. The satellite will use radar to create three-dimensional maps of wooded areas, with the aim of giving better insight into the role of trees in tackling climate change. There's
both that and day-to-day capacity. I just bought some fresh cut tulips from this lady in the street. She's got it's not even a store, she has a tiny stool on the side of the road, and she's got flowers, fresh herbs, and that's what people are doing actually this Sunday morning. There's a really old car, this old larder with a tarpaulin stretched across the bonnet, and a man has set up basically a travelling fishing shop. He's got rods, bait, weights, all of those things, and they crowd just to really work hard on the space to fit it all into us to make it right. And this is life on a Sunday morning. It's about 35 kilometres. We are so close, and it's beautiful. People moving around, I can see a child just coming towards us, a little girl with a football under her arm on the way to the park. Actually, I just saw a woman that's clearly on the way to an engagement or something like that. She had this arm full of shiny balloons, there was champagne, there was a ring, and she was carrying one of those little gift bags that clearly had a bottle of something nice inside to be given as a present.
I will only show you how it's paper. Hello, my name is Stanislav and the owner of beauty salon Feria Veloci, which is located in the city center of Zaporizhia. We make our men's and women's beautiful.
You have a beauty room in there?
10 April 1923, it was 2 years ago. It was the cabinet of rubbish.
My eye is particularly drawn. There's all the beauty equipment in here or just in the window actually. There's what looks like a big glass vase, and it is filled to the brim and beyond, heaping out the top with spent Botox needles, and the little glass bottles of the products and the orange needles. People are clearly still coming for their Botox. I think what it says, what's really interesting, is even in a time of war, people still want to feel and look good. Even at a time like this, even when sometimes you're heading for a shelter when there's an attack, it's so important even now that people feel good about themselves.
At the moment in Zaporizhia, people are very nervous. A lot of bombs are coming, people are nervous every day, you see. And what we would like to do? We would like to do something hairdressing, something maybe to make a good smile, everything. Only a good smile, the money support for today to survive. It's very important for today. What is going on every day. We don't know when it will be in a few minutes. The bomb from occupied cities coming for you for 2-3 minutes, engaged bombs. On these days we should live and we should support each other. It's very important.
So actually, it's about people's mental health, people doing things that feel normal, to feel good about themselves. But also, as you say there, it's important because you are supporting businesses in your community if you are still coming and getting these things done.
Exactly.
I'm beautiful, I'm pretty, I'm happy. Once a week I go to this place because I wash my hands because I have curly hair and I don't like curly hair.
You come and have a blow dry straight every week?
Yes, once a week. To the free. No one, no terrorism cannot stop our Ukrainian spirit. It is very cool that we have some places where we can go, and this is little moments when we have happy moments, because sometimes we cannot sleep. I work at school with children, we have lesson, and after that we go to the shelter, one moment shelter, and after that in the class. It is very hard. My native city, small city, Poloye, it is only 100 kilometers, but it is in occupation. My father and my dad stay there, and it is very big pain in my heart, but I believe that one day I can come back to home and hug my parents.
That's it from Anna in Zaporizhia for the moment. We'll hear back from her in just a few minutes. changes at BP, more of a focus on oil and gas. The company's just seen the profits come in below expectations. Sean has got more.
Hi, Nick. Yes, with pressure on the bosses at BP to make big changes. So these profits just came in at over £1 billion in the first 3 months of the financial year. So almost half that of a year ago. Oil prices have been much lower in that time, as well as we've discussed. But some investors want to see less of a focus on the company says in its results this morning a share buyback, so sort of another way of giving shareholders a better return, a bit like a dividend, has been cut considerably. I've got Ashley Kelty, who's an oil and gas research analyst with Parliamentary, with me this morning. Actually, much in this to give investors confidence that the bosses are on the right track?
No, I don't think there is actually. I think these results are disappointing. Certainly, the poorer performance in this quarter had been flagged. However, oil prices have come down since poor performance was highlighted, and it doesn't look like they're going to get any better anytime soon. So the big concern is the big rise in net debt. That's jumped by over a third since the end of 2023, and with lower free cash generation from lower oil prices, it's going to be very hard to get that down. The share buybacks look like they're only going to be $3 billion this year, which is a fraction of the $7 billion they paid out last year. But at least they did keep the dividend held at 8 cents a share.
Can you give us an idea, actually, of just how drastic the changes need to be to convince some of these investors about what BP looks like, about the British business that we know?
Well, they need to really ditch the low-margin renewables business. They're just clearly not very good at it. It doesn't generate the same returns that oil and gas want. I think investors want them to focus on what they're good at, which is oil and gas. We're seeing the move away from
oil prices so much lower. How does that tell us?
Well, it doesn't. It's still better than renewables. The problem is renewable subsidies are going to be cut with the large push to rearm across Europe. So subsidies from governments for renewables are going to fall. It's going to be bombs over wind farms, I think, for a few years. So the returns for that are going to be under pressure. But for oil and gas, there is still high returns. They are under pressure, but we need to reduce costs as well. But the problem is BP are not going to generate the money to invest.
Ashley, thank you. Ashley Kelty there from Parliamentary. Sean, thank you very much indeed. It's coming up to 23 minutes past 7. Keir Starmer says he won't choose between Europe and the United States. Good relations, he says, are needed with both. But the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey, whose long-term objective is to rejoin the EU, insists that he can and he should. This is now no longer a theoretical question. Ministers are trying to negotiate a free trade deal with the US in the days before resetting our relationship with the EU at a major summit in just 3 weeks' time. In the last of our party leader interviews ahead of the local elections in England, we are joined in the studio, I'm delighted to say, by Sir Ed Davey himself. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Now, I know these are local elections, and you may ask, why am I asking you about Europe? It seems to me it is a key defining issue, and it has been for you and your party. And I think people are interested to know just what would you give up in order to get a better relationship, want a better relationship? Would you, for example, as apparently the government are on pressure to do, give up control of the rules governing our food safety policy, even though as a result of Brexit we can no longer rewrite those rules or amend them?
Well, I welcome the fact that the UK government is sitting down with Europe and trying to find a way to restore trust, restore that relationship. I think we've seen with President Trump in the White House the importance of our trading relationship with Europe, our cooperation on defence and security, and we need to be rather more mature and rebuild that relationship than we saw with the previous government. So I welcome that.
Yeah, so you accept that there's give and take, isn't there? We know what you want to gain from a better relationship, but we might have to give things up, and one of those things is rules on food safety.
Well, we will certainly look at that as a positive thing.
As in, we're prepared to give it up.
We need to look at the details. The key thing is waiting for our national interest. And let me take you to something we've been really clear about. I was speaking before tariffs. Now, with a customs union, you're giving something up the ability to negotiate lots of other trade deals. We've seen from the Conservatives how they failed miserably to get good trade deals. Indeed, their trade deals with Australia and New Zealand undermine British farmers. So the question is, when you come to these negotiations, are you winning something for our country? And with a customs union, our example, we win a huge amount. We give opportunities to export far more, to reduce costs, reduce delays, get rid of red tape. That's the grow out.
There's the game. As is the way with interviews, we want to focus on the pain as well, if you'll forgive me. Another thing we know is part of these current negotiations, which is why I asked about it, is that the French government are demanding to retain more access to fish in British waters. And they're in fact saying, to the amazement of Kaja Kallas, the EU Security High Commissioner, when I interviewed her on this programme, that we can't be part of the defence of Europe, or a greater part of the defence of Europe, unless we give up control over our fish to that extent. Is that something that's reasonable to give up?
Well, I was really concerned to see the French making that move. I think it's pretty unreasonable, actually, for the same reason that the EU security chief was talking about. And I think this shows that the government have made a mistake in our relationship with Europe, in resetting that relationship. They should have been far more positive from the start. They should have engaged with, for example, the proposal coming from Europeans about a youth mobility scheme. Liberal Democrats have supported that. Because if you're going to win for our country, you've got to show that you're willing to engage with our European colleagues. I'm afraid the Labour government has been very timid and slow on that. And if
Just
you
be
are
clear on that one, if I could, because it's another example of where there is a trade-off. The government seemed reluctant to agree to a youth mobility scheme that could increase their migration as more young people come from the EU to here. You say we live with that because the gains are worth having.
Yeah, we've argued for a youth mobility scheme a bit like we already have with Korea, Japan and so on, which would be a cap scheme, so you had some control. But we think if you do that sort of engagement with Europe, you can reset the relationship, you can rebuild trust, and things like the French are saying on fishing would go away.
Now, it is the local elections, so a last quick word. You don't want to comment on polls, but they have you way behind not just the Tories and the Labour Party, but also Reform UK. Can the Liberal Democrats do it?
I'm expecting a really good night for the Liberal Democrats. We're fighting the Conservatives in most of the areas in the Shires, and I think we could look for a really good result when we make big gains for the Conservatives.
Well, they don't get the chance to sort you after the results are in. Sorry, Davey, leader of Liberal Democrats. Thank you for coming in. Thank you, studio.
It is exactly 28 minutes past 7 and Carthy's back with sport. Morning, Carthy.
Morning, thank you very much. The Arsenal manager Mikel Arteta has admitted they feel the weight of history ahead of tonight's Champions League semi-final first leg against Paris Saint-Germain. Arsenal have never won the prestigious European competition. We can speak to the BBC senior football reporter. Morning, Alex Howe.
Morning.
Morning. The weight of history, that phrase, they haven't reached a final since 2006. How much pressure would that look at to tonight?
It's a lot of pressure for what is particularly a young team for Arsenal, but what Mikel Arteta is good at is creating a mentality at the club that means that everyone involved there, all the players, think that they can achieve something. What he's done in his time there since he has taken over in 2020, won the FA Cup in the pandemic, and then since then they've progressed year on year. They finished second in the last two Premier League seasons. Look like they're going to do that again this season, but they have progressed. They got to the quarter-final last year in the Champions League. So although there is the weight of history, the players will feel that they're going in the right direction.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that younger players, because I suppose part of that is they can put that down to a different generation of Arsenal players. They can move on with their own, making their own history, but they are having a good season, second in the Premier League, twice gone to Liverpool, into the semi-finals here in the Champions League, and they have defeated the reigning champions Real Madrid 5-1 in the quarterfinals, as you mentioned. So is there a sense that this is their time amongst those younger players?
There definitely is that feeling, like you say, a different era. The last time they got to the semi-final was in 2009, so a lot of these players would have been children then, and also some more confidence they can take going into this match is that they've already beaten PSG in the competition this season in the group phase. They beat them 2-0, and that night it was a particularly comfortable win for Arsenal. They looked too physical for PSG that night. However, under Luis Enrique, they've progressed. They're a completely different team since they played that match. They also didn't bring their key player, Ousmane Dembele, who had a falling out with the PSG manager, but since he was left out of that game, he scored 25 goals in 26 games, and also PSG have knocked out Aston Villa and Liverpool, so two other English teams out of the competition. So Arsenal can come in to this with confidence, and PSG will be looking at the previous match, although they lost, they've got some confidence themselves and having knocked out English teams out of the competition.
Yeah, it was an intriguing encounter ahead. Alex Howe, thank you very much. As commentary of that match on Five Live this evening. A few other headlines for you. And Leeds United had already confirmed promotion to the Premier League. They were able to celebrate last night. They were in front of their fans with a 4-0 win over Bristol City at Elland Road. Ronnie O'Sullivan is through to the quarterfinals of Snooker's World Championship at the Crucible. The 7-time champion beat China's Pang Junju by 13 frames to 4. And the boxer Christy Van Jr. has been discharged from by unanimous points decision on Saturday night and was admitted to hospital as a precaution.
Thank you. Today's going to be warm. Plenty of sunshine pretty much wherever you are, albeit easy places.
You're listening to Today on Radio 4 with Nick Robinson in London and Anna Foster in Dnipro in eastern Ukraine. It's just after 7:30. Let's get a summary of the news with Caroline Nichols.
The Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has declared victory in the country's general election, seen as one of the most consequential in its recent history. His Liberal Party won on a message of sovereignty against President Trump's trade tariffs and his desire to make Canada the 51st US state. Mr. Carney said Canada was facing a new reality and could never afford America's betrayal. Donald Trump is holding a rally later to mark 100 days since he was elected president for the second time. The event will be held in Michigan, a key battleground state which was won by his Republican Party after previously being held by the Democrats. Power has been restored to almost all of mainland Spain after yesterday's countrywide blackout. Substations in neighbouring Portugal are also gradually being brought back online. The cause of the blackout remains unknown.
What's this one? Oh, this is a mask. An oxygen mask, still wrapped in plastic, brand new. All of this is just vital, and it's getting used so quickly, and arrive and basically fit what they can in the vehicle and take it back with them.
Конечно, нам тяжело, потому что семьи здесь находятся на...
Of course, it's hard for us because our families are here and we are on the front line. We and they are in different situations. The missiles reach here. The city of Zaporizhia has been hit from all sides. Behind you was hit by 8 kamikaze drones in one day. All civilians experience the same pain as we do. From our side, we remember that our children, our grandchildren must live here. We do everything we can. We don't sleep. We work at full capacity. We do everything we can and even more.
Работаем вообще. То есть делаем, что мы можем и больше.
Peace involves giving up Ukrainian territory to Russia, potentially freezing that front line where it is now, where you're fighting. What do you think of that?
Я як військовий, який сам з окупованої території, який...
As a soldier from the occupied territory who left my home, friends, relatives, both living and dead, and went to defend our native Ukraine on Ukrainian territory, we cannot agree to give up our territories. This is our life, our past, without tears, without sorrow. How can you come to the modern life, to the modern age, and take someone's house away? This is Ukraine. There is a constitution and nationally accepted laws and rules of human existence. From my side regarding the territories, I had 11 hectares of land on which I was building some plants to grow grain, pumpkins, beets. Everything you want could be grown. My ancestors on my father's side, all are buried on that side. I can't even visit their graves. Since 2022 I haven't been able to visit my grandmother, grandfather, father, my uncle. All are there. They need someone to look after the graves, to care for them. So we have been deprived not only of territories, but also of agriculture, farms. Of course, everyone wants to get back what belongs to them. It was all laid down by our ancestors.
Она помогает нам очень сильно, поэтому большое спасибо ей. Ну, человеческое все.
wanted to bring you back inside. I missed this the first time round. But just inside the door, there's a little section of trophies. So this is really heavy. This is a Ukrainian shell casing. But what they've done is they have polished it up to a gleaming shine. And they keep this like an ornament. But also, this is a Russian helmet that they found. They took. It's got a soldier's name written in pen on the webbing inside. And this is the snapped off tail of a Russian drone. But just listen to this. It's made of just very light plywood, grey painted, very thin, quite rudimentary in many ways, this part of it. And again, this is something that they've found and they've brought back here because it reminds them of what they're fighting for and who they're fighting against. And you heard there some of the really crucial views from people who are putting their lives on the line every day to fight. Ultimately, the decision about what happens next on a ceasefire will be made by politics, even though it's important to say that any decision to cede territory should technically go to a referendum of the people. Constitutionally, that's what should happen. But it's all about the politicians at the moment. And I spoke to Alexander Mereshko. He is the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the Ukrainian Parliament. And I asked him whether Ukraine accepted the US proposal put forward to achieve a ceasefire.
Well, first of all, Ukraine has accepted unconditionally the initial proposal by President Trump. As for the most recent, we need to take a look at the conditions because I haven't seen yet official confirmation. But from what I read, it looks to me that it's tilted strongly in favor of Putin, and it strongly reminds me Putin's ultimatum, basically. And that's why I'm very skeptical, because, for example, when it comes to Ukraine's sovereignty over Crimea, which has status of temporarily occupied territory under international law, we can never agree recognizing Crimea as Russian territory. It's absolutely out of the question. It's totally unconstitutional. It goes against international law, against American national interests and American policy. So this is absolutely out of the question.
Because, of course, the leaked document, which has been circulated by Reuters, suggests those details that we were talking about. What is your position on whether Ukraine should cede territory in return for peace? Because I'm here in Zaporizhzhia, I've been talking to people here, and there are a real range of views. It's a very difficult and delicate decision to make. Some people here think it's worth it to save lives. Some people think it's an absolute red line. Where do you stand on it?
Well, not only me, our constitution and international law firmly stand for the principle of territorial integrity. And there is no legal mechanism in Ukrainian legislation, in Ukrainian constitution to cede our territories. On the one hand, it's absolutely impossible to cede these territories. But at the same time, we understand that it might take some time for us to return these territories, not necessarily by military hand, but maybe by using diplomatic and political means, political tools. But it takes some time. We understand this because we don't have right now enough weaponry, but sooner or later, Crimea will return under control of Ukraine. No doubt about this.
So you're saying it's impossible for Ukraine to accept the US ceasefire proposal that's on the table now?
It's extremely dangerous idea because if we do it, we will undermine the whole security order and international legal order, because it will create extremely dangerous precedent for the whole world when aggressor is not punished for his crime but rewarded for his crime. It will embolden all kinds of potential aggressors all over the world.
The US proposal requires Ukraine to give up territory. You've said that Ukraine is short of weapons, desperate for backing. How do you see the fighting coming to a halt if none of those options are options that you're able to accept?
Well, if we don't get on time American military support as before, it will make our situation difficult, and it will translate into losses of human lives, including civilian population, including children, of course, unfortunately. And it's a very heavy moral responsibility on President Trump if he decides to stop providing weaponry to Ukraine.
Alexander Mereshko, thank you for joining us.
It is now 17 minutes to 8. Planes, trains and automobiles and much more besides ground to halt as a result of what's thought to be Europe's biggest ever power cut in Spain, Portugal and parts of France. The key question, how and why it happened, has yet to be fully answered, and we'll explore that after 8 o'clock. But first, the disruption caused is still being felt by many, even as power is restored. This was the moment people on the streets of Madrid celebrated as the lights came back on. This morning, Spain's electricity grid operator says all the substations are operating, meeting virtually all demand. But yesterday, of course, it was a different story. And we're joined by someone who's had to deal with the chaos. Carolyn Atkinson is in the back of a taxi. And I'm told, Carolyn, you're driving south in an attempt to go north. How come?
Exactly right. Well, it is definitely chaotic. I was actually on a train, the fast intercity train from Seville to Madrid yesterday. We got about 25 minutes outside Seville, stopped in the middle of nowhere, no houses, no people, fields on either side, and had no idea, obviously, what was about to unfold. We spent about 8 hours stuck on that train, very, very hot. Eventually, after a couple of hours, somebody managed to open some doors, a civil guard turned up, and we were stuck really high up, so we couldn't get off the train even if we wanted to. Eventually the ladders appeared, and then there was a human chain. They got us all off the train. We walked about 2 kilometers along a track towards a village. It felt like come from away at that point, and the villagers just lined the streets and took us in, put us into their municipal sports centre, gave us food and blankets, beautifully laundered sheets. Everyone came out and just helped. It was absolutely incredible. A fire engine, obviously we had no lights, we had no internet, we didn't know what was happening, and fire engine drove into the sports centre and turned its headlights on so we could actually see what we were doing.
It's a wonderful story.
Now.
Yeah,
but south now,
yeah. Just before we get to where you're going now and why, did you know what was going on? I mean, the most distressing thing is to be stuck somewhere and just not know how long for or why. Did you have any information at all?
No, I mean, there was a lot of, rumour going around, and obviously my Spanish isn't fantastic. Being a journalist, I absolutely wanted to know, were we just a little local problem, or was this a massive, the context, we had no idea. And gradually, one person did have some internet for about 3 seconds, and they managed to establish that something was going on across Spain. At one point they said it was 11 countries. They were convinced it was Copenhagen as well. So there was lots of very, very duff information going on, but no idea. No idea.
Now we come then finally to the going south in order to go north. Where are you off to?
So basically there are no buses, there are no planes, there's no trains. So hire cars are absolutely, people least the honeypot. But we can only I hooked up with 2 other people, and we are driving south from Seville down to Jerez to get the only hire car in Spain as far as we can see, to then drive south north again, right up to Madrid, which is where we're aiming for. That's where we were for yesterday.
Well, we wish you a great deal of luck. If the hire car's not there, there's quite a lot I can think of to do in Jerez, actually. Some, Jerry, what else? I mean, why come over at all, really? But I'm so delighted you had the time to join, and also some power on your mobile phone, Carolyn Atkinson.
So far, so good.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you.
luck. Thank you for joining us.
It's 14 minutes to 8. Time for thought for the day. And the speaker this morning is the Reverend Canon Dr. Jen Smith, Superintendent Minister of Wesley's Chapel.
This evening, President Trump will mark his first 100 days in office with a rally in Michigan. It was Franklin Roosevelt who introduced the phrase. He used it on the radio in 1933 as he promised urgent action to a country in the grip of the Great Depression. Since then, the 100 days has become a way of measuring the initial success of a new government. Our promises translating into policy. Is power in safe hands? But on this 99th day, I want to cast my mind back to day 1. In her sermon before his inauguration, Bishop Marion Buddy asked President Trump to be merciful. Specifically, she asked mercy for people who were scared of his policies. Some lauded her, others condemned. To ask mercy
Thank you guys for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe my channel.
Does as well.
Thank
What
you.
if someone takes advantage?
I'll do another
How can I
live
make
driving
space for
tonight
the
around
plans of others
8:10
without
and
compromising my
8:15 in
own?
the evening. Thank
For
you.
Christians, any mercy is modeled on the mercy of God. If we show